Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar featuring the latest in AP automation with TimberScan Titanium for Sage 100 Contractor. Our subject matter expert today is Mike Carbonell from Core Associates. Just a few notes before we get started. Everyone is muted for a clean listening experience. If you have questions, please type them into the questions box and we will address them at the end of the session. For the best visual experience, please maximize your screen. This webinar is being recorded and the link will be emailed out to everyone later today. I will now turn it over to you, Mike.
All right, thank you very much, Krista. Appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. So as Krista said, we're going to focus our attention today on TimberScan Titanium, which is designed specifically for Sage 100. We'll be looking at and focusing on primarily looking at it from the lens of accounts payable and the accounts payable workflow process. However, we will talk a little bit more about just a kind of a full document management solution as well. So with that, what I'll do is I'm going to kick off a brief PowerPoint presentation, only a few slides. And then once the PowerPoint is finished, we're going to jump right into the application. We're going to spend the rest of the time kind of walking through the solution and talk about from an end-to-end perspective how TimberScan Titanium works. So basically, what is TimberScan 100 or T100 as we tend to refer to it? It's a workflow automation solution, and it allows clients to be more productive, freedom from labeling, coding, and storing paper documents, and eliminates exhaustive searches. So we're basically trying to take what in many cases is a manual process and try to eliminate most of those manual steps and make everything electronic as much as we possibly can. We can do a lot of that. So the system is designed to be one system, one platform, one data entry point, seamlessly integrated with Sage. It's an automated workflow automation from purchase order to routing and approval of AP invoices, and you'll see me when we go into the application. I'm going to process invoices both against purchase orders and also invoices that perhaps don't have a purchase order. So we'll look at both options. It's a proven technology. Currently, Core Associates has over 2,000 clients and over 30,000 users of our applications. It was designed exclusively for Sage 100. So the AP entry screen that I'm going to show you replicates the Sage accounts payable distribution grid. So that way, when you're implementing TimberScan for 100, it's not like you have to learn a new AP entry process. Things will remain the same from that perspective. We designed it in a format that we think is a little bit easier to work with, but from the perspective of the various fields that are associated with an AP invoice entry, things are going to stay the same. We also create what are called electronic packets. So inside Sage 100, you could potentially go to an invoice record and you could click on the paperclip attachment and you could open up and see the invoice, any of the supporting documents, and potentially the payment record right there in one screen. So what is T100 or Titanium for 100? It's an AP routing and approval system. It was designed around that process first, and in many cases when we meet with a company that's looking to try and address their, we'll call it their needs with respect to workflow and trying to become more electronic with how they handle documents, accounts payable is one of the first places that they start. They want to be able to take that AP process and get that under control. And once they've been able to do that, then they can start to look at other areas of their organization where they might also want to become a lot more efficient in terms of not having to do things manually. But AP is, in essence, in many cases where things start. It is a full enterprise content management system. So it can be used obviously for AP routing and approval, and that's where I'm going to focus a lot of my attention in the presentation in a few minutes. But it can also be used for other document management as well. So if you had a scenario where, for example, you were storing purchase orders, receiving tickets, packing slips, It could be anything that's outside of kind of construction, if you will. Maybe it's human resource documents even, or something like that. Maybe payroll timesheets. You want to be able to save them in a repository where you could then potentially call them up and look at them and view them later on for whatever purposes. They're all available to you in one place, which gives you easy access rather than having to go into the filing cabinets or having to potentially go out to the Windows file system, which, yes, you can store documents in the Windows file system. We all do it. But the problem with the Windows file system is that it's not very secure. There are no rules and regulations behind it. You can basically do whatever you want. Tightly integrated with Sage 100. And as you'll see as we start to get into the application, how the system is designed where it's pulling in and exchanging data back and forth between Titanium and Sage 100. So it just makes it very easy to be able to access the information. It's almost as if Titanium is an extension of Sage 100, the way that it's designed. So this is the last screen that I'm going to show before we actually go into the application. And it's a workflow process that I wanted to just kind of go through and explain, because what I'm going to do once we leave the PowerPoint is I'm going to go through these steps in quite a bit of detail once we get into Titanium. So basically it starts at the point where an invoice arrives at your door. And regardless of how you receive the invoices, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to acquire them into the Titanium application. Once the invoices have been acquired, they're going to be passed on to data entry. Data entry is going to take place inside Titanium. It's as if we were keying it into Sage 100 Contractor, but we're not. We're actually keying it into Titanium first. This gives us the opportunity to do a few things. One, you could partially code an invoice if you want. So you don't necessarily have to have an invoice that's fully coded. It could maybe be charged to, for example, just a job, but not the cost code, for example. And then you can send it off for approval and then let the approvers do the coding on their end. The other option, you could potentially enter the invoice, and if you wanted to immediately update Sage 100, you could do so as long as everything was fully coded, and then let the approvers modify certain restricted information, such as, for example, a cost code or a cost type. So everything's going to start when we get into data entry. We're going to go through this process. We're going to see how you can process invoices, whether they're partially coded, whether they're processed against a purchase order, whatever it might be. There's also an optical character recognition component to the application. So you can set up OCR to be able to read documents, and it eliminates the coding of those documents in many cases. Once the invoices have been entered, they get sent off to the approvers. Approvers are going to go into Titanium. They're going to be walking through the application to be able to approve their invoices. And once that approval process is done, the invoices then update Sage 100. Financials have been updated. And then at that point, if, let's say a check run is done, when that payment process takes place, those checks can be attached to the invoices. We'll walk through that process. That can be done in Titanium. And then once that's completed, that information gets sent back to Sage 100 also. So again, when we start talking about those packets, I could be inside Sage 100 and I can see everything from the invoice all the way down to, down to the payment record, the check. You can also see it in Titanium, and you have a lot more flexibility in terms of things that you could potentially choose. You can create searches and what have you to be able to go search and combine documents, but the paperclip option from within Sage 100 will give you a view of those documents if you need to as well. Okay, so what we're going to do next is I'm going to break out of the PowerPoint, and I'm going into, I'm going to go into the application, and we're going to walk through this workflow process starting at the point where an invoice arrives at your door. So let's go ahead and get out of there. Okay, so I have already logged into both Sage 100 and I've logged into Titanium. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to jump into Titanium now. Basically what I'm doing is I just, selected this from my web browser. So, in this case, I was using Google Chrome. I logged in. It is a browser-based and a cloud-based application. Now, let me just make sure that I qualify what I just said. It's a browser-based application, as you can see. I'm using the web browser here. I'm using the side panel view to be able to go in and select various data off of the side panel to be able to process. And I mentioned that it's a cloud-based solution as well. Now you might think to yourself, well, if Sage 100 is loaded on my server, how am I going to be able to access Titanium if it's if it's running in the cloud? Well, basically the way it's designed is that we can actually install it on your local machine. So even though it is designed to be used in the cloud, you can install it install it locally, and you can use it basically almost like a cloud solution, only it's tied to Sage 100 on your server. So there's no issue there whatsoever. It's all, very seamless integration between the two applications, and it's running on your server rather than in a cloud if that's the way you want it to process. Okay, so I've logged in. Again, I mentioned, from a navigation perspective, you have the side panel here with all of your menu items down the list, and we're going to kind of jump into several of these as we go through the process here. I also opened this up with my dashboard. So the dashboard gives me several different options and several different views with which I can look at information. Now, what I did is I opened this up as, we'll call this, maybe I'm looking at this more from an executive view. So because of the fact that I'm looking at all users, I'm looking at anyone that may have any transactions, any invoices outstanding in the system. So if I were, again, I'm an executive, I can come in here at any given time. How many outstanding invoices do we have? What's the total dollar amount? How many of those invoices are potentially on hold, and how many of them are overdue? And as I start to come down here into the various panels, you can see as I start to hover the mouse on these these different grids here, that it starts to bring up a little tooltip, and it lets me know, for example, how many invoices I have outstanding for that particular vendor. You can do the same thing here on the little widgets here, and then I can scroll over and I can see by job. For example, I've got the Williams Post Office job. Looks like, has $26.88 outstanding. Who it's been assigned to, it looks like all of these have been assigned to this one person. And then I can kind of work my way down through here. I can see other information. So there's a lot of detail that's available to me right here on the dashboard as I first log into the system. Now, what you can also do is you can get more specific. Now, my database, you can see, doesn't have a whole bunch of users that have information assigned to them or what have you. If there were, when I click on this, I could go in and I could start to scroll down the various people that invoices, for example, have been assigned to, and I can select and go find just their invoices. As you can see in my system, everything's assigned to me, so it's basically replicating what I saw with all users. But you get the idea. I could potentially be in the system. I could go look at a specific person and say, okay, how many invoices does this person have outstanding right now? How long have they been assigned to them? And you've got all, various information here to be able to see all of that info all on one screen. So nice visual right up front. This kind of eliminates the idea of having to have all sorts of, various disparate reports built into the system. I can quickly go look and I can isolate and I can see things right on the front end, right here from the very beginning. And you can also, this can also be set up obviously with individual users. So if I were just, let's say I'm an approver, and that's my primary role in using TimberScan Titanium, is to come in once invoices get assigned to me and I'm approving those invoices. Well, I could still log in and have my dashboard in front of me, So I'm quickly looking off my dashboard to say, oh, today I've got 2 invoices assigned to me. Here's the total dollar amount. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to get in and I'm going to start processing and approving those invoices. Okay, enough about the dashboards for right now. Let's go through this workflow process. Let's start at the point where an invoice arrives at your door. So to get those invoices into the system, I'm going to go into data entry, and when I open this up, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the acquire function. Now from here, there are several options. I'm going to talk about these 2 selection items here at the top in a few minutes. Let me just go ahead and populate these for right now. And then I'm going to talk about the different ways in which you can go about selecting documents or acquiring them. So one thing I could do is I could drag and drop. So if I just wanted to come in here, if I had something that maybe was in a file, or maybe something on my desktop, something that maybe got emailed to me, and I just want to grab the attachment, I can just go ahead and just drag and drop that particular document to the screen. And when I continue, it opens up those particular documents as you see here. You have the option for opening or closing the thumbnail view, which gives me the opportunity to see multiple pages here in the view. Obviously at the top, I've got all of my annotation controls. So if I wanted to make the documents larger or smaller, I can just go ahead and start to zoom in and just make it bigger if I need to. And as I'm looking at this first page, I see that this is invoice 393. Over here in the thumbnail, if I scroll to the second page, I do have a second invoice. Now, what typically will happen is when you acquire invoices into Titanium, what the system will do is it will automatically separate each PDF and consider it a separate invoice. But in this case, because SCS sent me 2 invoices in one PDF, it didn't recognize it. It looked as if they sent me a 2-page invoice, but actually they sent me 2 separate invoices. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split these. It's very simple. I'm just going to go ahead and right click. I'm going to say split, and now I've just separated these 2 documents. So if I were to go ahead and acquire these 2 now, these would be separated as 2 separate invoices that would get acquired and sent in for data entry. Okay, so drag and drop and splitting one option. Let's talk about a different option. Let's say that invoices came in the mail. In that case, what you would do is you would put those invoices onto your scanning device, and you would scan them to a, we'll call it the TimberScan Titanium file. And then all someone has to do is they come in here, they open the file. Let me just go in here to my invoices. And then I can just go ahead and I can grab a whole stack of invoices all at the same time, open them up. They open up into the viewer, and when I continue forward here, it just pops those invoices open. I can scroll down through the various invoices if I need to. And once I'm finished and I look at it, I can just say, okay, let's go ahead and acquire. That quick, that simple, that easy. All right, so we've talked about drag and drop. We talked about scanning. Let's talk about one more option. So again, what I could do is the system also has an email monitoring program associated with it. You know, today more and more companies are setting up, for example, a designated AP email address where they've asked vendors, for example, to send their invoices to. And what you can do is you could just have the system monitor that email address. And then what all that's going to happen is it's going to monitor the email address. It's going to take the attachment, that invoice attachment from the email. It's going to drop it into a file. And then all someone has to do here is they come in, open this up. They're just going to say, okay, open up that email file. Here are the invoices in the email file. I'm just going to go ahead, grab that whole group all at the same time. And I'm going to pull them all in at once. And now I've grabbed that whole stack of invoices again. Now, what would be the kind of the advantage or purpose of this? Well, this way someone doesn't have to constantly monitor that email address. The system is just going through, it's monitoring it for you. It's pulling those invoices in, and then they're dropping them into a file, and then you can just go through and sort through the file and pull out the invoices, and then you just go ahead and acquire them. So quick, easy, doesn't require someone having to monitor the email address or any of that. It's doing it for you, and it's just pulling it into a file. So let's back up one more time. I just want to talk about these two fields here. So basically what's going to happen is that, excuse me, once the invoices are, when you're acquiring invoices, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be acquiring and you're going to be assigning them to the person or group in data entry that you want to be able to send them to. Because the workflow process, if you think back to the PowerPoint slide, the workflow process is going to be invoices are going to get acquired. They're going to be assigned to data entry. Data entry is going to start that process and then send them off to the approvers. They're not going directly to the approver yet. They're going to go through data entry first. So this could be a person that you assign the invoices to. It could be a group of people that you put in, you could have multiple people logged in that you can assign to a group, or you can just have multiple, approvers or excuse me, multiple data entry people or groups. I only happen to have one in my sample database, but I could potentially have a whole list of people here, and I just select who I want to assign the invoices to. Second thing that I do is I decide what type of document it is. So in this case, we're acquiring invoices, but there may be circumstances where I'm acquiring other types of documents. Or maybe we just did a check run and I want to go in here and I want to process the invoices against, or I want to take those checks and acquire them so that I can attach it to the invoice. So what we're going to do is we're going to say who it's being assigned to in data entry and what type of document it is, which is in this case, it's an invoice. Then we're going to go ahead and acquire. Now, having gone through and said that, there is one other option down here called auto acquire. So here's what auto acquire does. It works with hand in hand with your email monitoring program. So in auto acquire, what you can do is you could set up that designated AP email address to be able to receive invoices, and this could come from a specific vendor or vendors, or you could just set up a wildcard where you say anything that comes in to this AP inbox, we're going to take those invoices automatically, we're going to assign them to this person in data entry. If those invoices, if we had a scenario like we did with that first group of invoices that I acquired where I had to split the invoices in two, if we get that scenario, we're going to give it some parameters as to how we want to go about splitting those invoices. And then if we're using the Capture OCR tool, we're going to send it through Capture, let the system read the information using OCR technology. And so basically what I'm describing here is someone could potentially acquire invoices, assign them to the person that they need to go to or group of people that they need to go to in data entry, and no one ever touched anything. There was no user intervention to get those invoices all the way to AP invoice entry. The system did it all for you automatically. So we're starting to, hopefully what we're working toward here is we're eliminating not only steps, but we're also eliminating the handling of paper all along the way. So if we're getting those invoices in by email and the system is acquiring them for us automatically, we've streamlined the process dramatically, and we didn't have to waste the time to open up the mail, take the invoices out, put them on a scanning device, scan them and bring them in. All of that's been done for us. And now the invoices are sitting in AP invoice entry. And that's where I'm going to go next. So we've gone through, we've acquired some invoices. They're sitting in the AP invoice entry queue, and I'm going to go in there now. So let's pop into a couple of invoices and we'll go through a few examples here. Okay, so as it brings up this invoice, there are several things that I want to talk about with regard to the invoice entry scan. And you notice a little message that popped up here. Capture template was not matched. And I'm going to explain that in a few minutes. So what you're seeing here, this is the invoice entry screen where I have my invoice image at the top of the screen. I have my data entry grid down here in the lower part of the screen. and I have a series of control buttons across the bottom, which I'm going to talk about in a few moments here. Now, as I was describing when we were walking through the PowerPoint slide, these fields are all lined up in the exact same order as they are in Sage 100. If I go over here to Sage 100 data entry, has the exact same fields in the exact same order: invoice number, order number, subcontract number, vendor number, so on and so forth. Everything is lined up the same. The only difference is we put it in this kind of grid format. We felt like it's easier to be able to work with from here, and it allows us to be able to see the image at the same time. Now, you might say, well, I'm only seeing about half of this invoice image right now. Well, what you can do, there's several things I can do here. First of all, down here, I could say, okay, let's click on this change mode button. If I do that, it moves the grid over to the other side. So now what I could do is I could have the invoice image on one side, I can have the grid on the other, or maybe I've got a wide screen, for example, let's say I've got the invoice on part of that screen, I've got the grid on the other. Let's move it back for just a second. Another option is, if you click on this little up arrow right here in the grid, what I can do is I can just take the invoice image and I can pull it off and move it off to my second screen if I want. So now I can have the invoice image on one screen and I can have my data entry grid on the other. So it just makes it that much easier, that much more simple. Now, another thing that we can do here is, as we're starting to kind of process the invoice, I want to note a couple of things. You notice how a few of these fields on the invoice image are highlighted and they're already populated? Now, if you remember, there was a message that came up and it said a capture template was not matched. What that meant is that I haven't set up an OCR template for this particular vendor yet. But we have developed a product as we developed the optical character recognition tool. We created what was called a smart extraction technology that we embedded into this particular tool. So what the system does is it goes out and it looks for some common fields on an invoice. It's looking for where the invoice number is, the billing date, the due date, the dollar amount. And even though I don't have an OCR template set up, it's populating those fields automatically for me. Now, let's go a couple of steps further. Let's say that I wanted to go out and reference, for example, a purchase order that was created in Sage 100. I just go ahead and do my search. I'm going to call up my list of purchase orders here. And I'm just going to take this first order here. I'm just going to double click on it. And you see what happens here. So now what it did is it pulled everything from that purchase order and it populated the rest of the grid for me. It put in the vendor, the job, the purchase order. It even populated the line item information for me. So by simply referencing that purchase order, it populated the screen. I could obviously make any changes that I need to here, but basically what it's doing is it's just saying, okay, here's your information. If you need to modify it, go ahead. But we just pulled the information from the PO that you just referenced. And then I'm just going to say, go ahead and save and route that particular invoice off to the approvers. If there were any supporting documents, I could just click on the supporting documents tab. I don't happen to have any for this one, but I could. It would pull up those supporting documents. So if I had acquired a purchase order or a receiver or anything like that, and I wanted to attach it to the purchase order here, I could do so. Okay, so that's one option. We were able to take the invoice, we referenced a purchase order or a subcontract, for example, it just pulled up the information directly from that document. Let's back up for a second. Let's look at a different option. Okay, here's another scenario. Now, here's one where the system went out, it not only referenced using the smart extraction tool, it not only found the invoice number, the billing date, the due date, but it also referenced the purchase order number. Because Ramirez puts their PO number on their invoice. So this is another one of those tools, or part of the Smart Extraction tool, where it goes out, it finds the PO number, and now because it referenced the PO number, it has pulled in everything associated with that particular purchase order, and again, populated all of the line item information for me. So I didn't even have to set up any type of a template, if you will, an OCR template here. It just pulled the information in, and it just referenced it. So if you think about, if we go back and think about where everything starts, where we have to acquire an invoice. If we were using the auto acquire to acquire the Ramirez Materials invoices. So the system, Ramirez Materials, emailed us the invoice. It came in. We let the system auto acquire it for us. So we bypassed having to do the acquire step. It automatically got assigned to data entry. When I open up my screen in invoice entry, not only has it already acquired the Ramirez Materials invoice, but it's already populated all of my information for me because it read it directly from the invoice image, pulled all this information in, and hypothetically, I could start this process by simply saying, okay, go ahead and save and route the invoice, and off it goes to the approver. I'm basically just viewing this as kind of just a double check to make sure everything looks okay. That's how quickly and how easily you can take an invoice, get it acquired into the system, and get it sent off for review and approval. Let's go back again. Let's look at a couple of other things real quick. So we've got George Wireless again. You know, if I wanted to, for example, what I could do is I could come in here. Maybe I'm not referencing a purchase order in this case. I don't even know if I have a George Wireless. We'll just try. Let's see if we have something. We'll just use this one right here. You know, maybe I know what job it's associated with. Maybe it's, you know, this Williams Post Office job. Well, let's say that's all I know at this point. I don't have any other information other than that. Well, I could partially code this invoice. I could say that, you know, I'm simply going to come in here and, you know, just based on the job or maybe job and phase, I'm just going to go in, pull in the information, and then from there, I'm just going to go ahead and send this off to the approvers. This is a partially coded invoice because I want the approvers to come in and I want them to do the rest of the coding. So they're going to come in, they're going to do their thing. I think to get this down to the distribution, I've set it up so I have a requirement. I've got to put in a description. And I should be able to go down here, I think. There we go. So now it just defaults to the job info. Let's say I'm done with that. I just go ahead and say save and route. If I want to attach any supporting documents, I can. Off it goes to the approvers right from here. Now, let's talk for a second, and we won't get into a lot of detail, but I'll show you how quickly you can set up a template here. So if I wanted to set up a template for George Wireless, I go out here to capture templates. And it looks like I've got something. Let's just use this as our example here. Okay. So here's George Wireless, where the Smart Extraction technology came in, and it found it found the invoice number, the billing date, the due date. It found, you know, we'll call this kind of an anchor, where it's, you know, something distinct, unique about the George Wireless invoice that lets me know that it's coming from George Wireless. And then if I wanted to start adding some other tools here, I wanted to say that maybe this managed right construction is the job number or something like that, I could do that. Or if maybe I said, let me just go ahead and, you know, put in their vendor code. So I just go out, I search their vendor code. I find, you know, what 109 is. George Wireless, we go ahead, we grab that, and now I have their vendor code. If I want to add another field, and I want to say that that is maybe the job number, because I know every time I get an invoice from George Wireless that we're going to assign it to a particular project. I can go out here, I can find the job, or if they put their job number on the invoice, I can just go ahead and do that. And now I've gone ahead and I've saved this information. Now anytime I get an invoice from George Wireless, it's not only going to do that smart extraction, but it's automatically going to read their vendor number and the job number and it's going to plug that information into the application so that from now on, George Wireless, when we get an invoice from them, those fields will be auto-populated. That's how quickly and easily you can set up a template, and you can read that for a particular vendor. Now, let me try one other thing here. I should be able to reload OCR since I just added the vendor number and the job number, and let's see if it will populate for me. There we go. So it just went in, it found that vendor number and job number from the template that I just set up, and then the system would just allow me to proceed forward from there. From this point on, every time we get an invoice from George Wireless, this is what it's going to do. It's going to find this information, automatically populate it, and then I can just send it off to be reviewed for review and approval at this point. And all of the distribution works the same as it would in Sage 100. So it's, I've got my job costing, I've got my equipment costing, if that's what we're doing here. So it really is mapped directly to the Sage 100 AP entry functionality. Okay, so let's say that we've done that and we've sent invoices off for approval. I'm going to switch for a moment. I'm going to become an approver. I'm going to walk in here, and I've got a couple of invoices that are routed to me. Now, you'll notice right on the front screen here, if I wanted to, I could, for example, if I had enough information, and there's some summary information, I can kind of scroll through here. So I see who the vendor is, the invoice number. It even looks like it's been assigned to job number 215. So hypothetically, what I could do, if I'm looking at this and I say, well, wait a minute, this isn't my job, I could just right from the screen, I could hit the reject button and I can reject it back to, a previous person that was part of this workflow. But if I decided that, okay, this is my project, I need to go through and I need to review and approve this invoice, you see this option that says sync task. Now, if this invoice had already been fully coded, there would be an option here that says approve versus sync task. So what syncing the task means is that there is something that still needs to be completed on this invoice in order for it to get approved, in order for it to update Sage 100. So that's what syncing the task does. It lets you go in, look at it, see what needs to be done as far as coding, and then once that part is done, I could potentially go in and approve, reject, attach any supporting documents. I can add notes to it if I need to. So if I want to put a note on this, anytime someone opens up the invoice from this point on, they would see that note. This way you don't have to clutter up the invoice with a bunch of sticky notes, for example. I could email this off to someone. Maybe I need to send this off to someone at Asphalt and Paving because I have a question. When you click on the email button, you can then go ahead and you can attach that particular invoice and any other documents that you need to when you send it off. And you're basically just, in essence, you're creating the email right here on the fly, attaching the invoice and sending it off. So you're not having to, go out to Outlook, take a PDF snapshot of this invoice, attach it to an Outlook email or whatever, and then send it out that way. You can just go ahead and create the email right from here and send it out. Now, this is designed to work in any environment. So I'm working on my desktop. Let's say I'm an approver and I'm out in the field somewhere. All right, so let me just shrink this down. All right, so, and get rid of, we'll hide this because as an approver. So I can now look at the invoice. It's going to make this a little bigger. I'm working on, as my machine is not completely simulating what would happen on a phone, you can see, but this is basically what it would look like to the great extent. I'm on my phone. I have my invoice here that I can look at. I can scroll through and see anything I need to on the invoice image. I have my data entry grid over here, seeing how it's been coded. And if I want to go through and I want to bring up my job costing lines, and I need to plug in, for example, what job it's associated with, I could say, okay, it's the Williams Post Office job. We'll go ahead and save that. We'll say whatever phase and cost code. So basically, I'm on my phone. I'm on an iPad, I'm at the job site, I'm home, it's after hours, but I've decided to pop in and I want to go look at, the various invoices that I need routed to me. You can do this on any device. The entire application is designed so that it will fit the invoice image and the grid onto any device, whether it's on a phone, on an iPad, or what have you. It's just basically a responsive user interface that takes that information and drops it into whatever your device is that you're working on, so that you're able to see the application in full detail while you're processing, regardless of where you are. So I could go ahead, I do my processing, I go ahead and approve the invoice. Off it goes to the approvers or to another approver if it needs to go to anybody else. If there's no one else in that process, and a lot of times what companies will do is they'll put what's called a quote unquote final approval step involved here, where maybe this goes back to accounting. Accounting takes that final look at the invoice, and then it gets sent off to Sage 100, where basically your financials are updated. Now, one final comment on this workflow. How did the invoice get to the approver? Because you didn't see, when I went in and said save and route, I didn't have to necessarily specify who it was being routed to. That's all done in the workflow setup. So down here, there's a whole setup where you go through and you can specify how you want to go about routing invoices, what kind of workflows you want to set up. If you said, well, we want to send it to the project manager on a job, or maybe it's, it's project manager and then project super, maybe it's, 3 people in the workflow. Maybe you want to set up thresholds, invoices greater than a certain dollar amount, get escalated up to another level of approval. All of those things are set up in the workflow. So it just makes it streamlined, it makes it simple, makes it easy. So if someone's in here and they're going through and processing, they just say, I want to save and route. The workflow kicks in, it sends it off to where it needs to go, and then they're just on to the next invoice. All right, a few other items here before we wrap up. So let's go over here to Sage 100 for just a second. Let's call up an invoice. Let's click on the paperclip. Here's the invoice. Here's that example. Okay, so what I was talking about before with the paperclip. So here's an example of an invoice that originated in Titanium. It was processed. It was sent over here to Sage 100. Been processed in Sage 100, it's done, and now the invoice image is residing in Sage 100. And I'm not sure if I have a check attached, but somewhere in here could be a check. Yep, so there's the payment record. So how did that check get attached? Well, let's talk about that for a moment. Let's go back out of here. So you're still going to process your payments in Sage 100 like you normally do, but over here in Titanium, we have an attached check feature. So I could, process those checks. I could send them off, whether they get printed on pre-printed check stock, whether they're done through, I don't know, ACH, whatever it might be. And then what Titanium allows me to do is it has an attached feature where I can come in, I can acquire those payment records, whether it's scanning them, whether it's pulling in a file, and I just pull in that particular file of scanned check records, specify what the bank account is, say what my starting check number is, and then once I do that, I hit the attach button. It can ripple through every one of those payment records. Could have been, I just printed out 50 checks. I acquired those 50 checks. Once they get acquired, I just go ahead and hit the attach. It ripples through, it attaches each of them, and that's how it then assigns them to that particular invoice image, so that when I open up and I see the invoice, now I'm seeing not only invoice and any supporting documents, I'm also seeing everything all the way down to the check. Okay, let's go through a couple of other items before we wrap up. So 2 other things that I wanted to cover. One in addition to what you saw me do here with the workflows, where I basically took an invoice from start to finish, what a lot of companies have also had to deal with from it, really kind of from that accounts payable perspective, is the idea of having to manage credit cards. So what happens? People are out making purchases using a credit card, and they have to then take the receipts. The receipts have to get back into accounting. Accounting has to somehow be able to, match the receipt against the statement, and then they, somehow have to go through and reconcile all of that, and then, make the payment to the credit card company. So we have a credit card solution that will do all of that, and it will create an invoice automatically in Titanium for you. So how it works is it's a forms tool that works hand in hand with Titanium, where it goes out and you can start. I'm going to say, for example, that I'm out at Home Depot and I just made a purchase at Home Depot, and I want to take that receipt and I'm going to attach it to a form that's on my phone, for example. I'm going to open up that credit card form, and when I open it up, what it's going to do is it's going to default some information here for me. I can fill in information as I need to. Here's the dollar amount of that particular transaction. Here's the actual invoice or the actual image of the Home Depot purchase that I just made. I'm finished with that. I can, I took a picture of it. I attached it. So again, I'm going to just switch this back here. So now I'm on my phone. I took a picture. I attached it to the form on my phone. As I kind of work my way down here, if I needed to code this, say what job and cost code is associated with or what phase, I can. Maybe I need to sign it. And then I just go out here and I say that I want to, let me bring this back up so we can see this a little better. I just go ahead and I submit that form. So we started out at the point where I'm at Home Depot, made a purchase with my credit card. I took a picture of that particular receipt. I attached it to my purchase order form, or excuse me, my credit card form. I submitted it. What it does is it sends it to accounting into the reconciliation program. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my reconciliation tool. And when I do that, the system actually gives me the ability to download the reconciled statement from the credit card company. We also recently created an integration with a product called Plaid. What Plaid does is it basically goes out and it's like a monitoring tool. It's monitoring that credit card company's statements, and it can pull the statement automatically so someone doesn't have to download it themselves. So now I come in here, I go into my statement records. When I call up that statement, over here on the left-hand side, these are the statement items from the statement itself. The right-hand side, these are the receipts that have been submitted. I can look on here and I can see how it's been coded so far. If I want to edit the receipt form, I can call it up. Here's my form here. If I needed to code it now, I see my image here. If I needed to say what job and cost code and phase is associated with it, I can do it here. Ultimately, what I could do is I can click on the reconcile button, and it will start to automatically reconcile and match the receipts to the statement items. When it doesn't find a receipt, the system will email the card holder, let them know that we're still waiting for their receipt. So what this does is this eliminates someone from having to manually gather all those receipts, manually go through the statement, and constantly having to manually reconcile. The system's doing it all electronically. Then once the reconciliation, you could do this more than once. Sometimes people wait till the end of the month, but you could do this every week if you wanted to. Once they've been reconciled, you click on the transfer to TimberScan button. It sends an invoice over to Titanium automatically, so that now when I open up Titanium and I go to AP invoice entry, it's already created an invoice or invoices, depending on how you want to send that the transactions over. So it creates an invoice from the reconciled statement. It could be what we call statement style, or it can create multiple invoices by what we call receipt style. And then you're just processing them like any other invoice and sending them off to Sage 100. That's how simple and easy it is. Again, the whole thing, the whole concept here is, in essence, from purchase to pay, we're trying to eliminate all of the manual steps that are involved and eliminate the paper all along the way. Two more items real quick before we finish up. I did mention that this is a full document management system. You can acquire any type of document in the system that you want. So if I wanted to acquire a purchase order, receiving ticket, whatever it might be, I can just do so. I can call it up. I can code a purchase order, just like I can code an AP invoice. I can say that it's a supporting document. So when the invoice comes in, now I have that purchase order available to me that I can use with whatever, invoice or invoices that PO might be associated with. If I have an approval process where I want to make sure that every single time somebody executes a purchase order or receiver, that it gets approved by someone, you can set up workflows for any other type of document, just like you can AP invoices. So it can work much the same way. Final thing I want to talk about before we open it up is, the search here screen, what this can do, if you want, along with being able to search any type of document, what you can do is you come in here and you could say, I am going to go out and I want to find for, let's say, job number. We'll use Williams Post Office. If I wanted to do, for example, a substantiated billing report, where I need to go out, I need to pull all of the AP invoice backup and maybe any supporting documents to it onto a report, and then be able to attach all of those invoices for substantiated billing, for T&M or cost plus billing, for a loan draw, for example, for a roll-up of any kind. I pull up my invoices, and I did this in a matter of seconds. I could add some more conditions where I say, go get me all this information for job 186, but for the period of May 1st to May 31st, for example. I get my information here. I click on this invoice report. It builds the report on the fly for me. And then I can put a title and a subtitle on the report. But behind it, what you'll notice, if I start to scroll down through the pages, it has all of the invoice images associated. So they're already attached. And I could just, download these and send these off to an auditor or, whatever I wanted to do. Okay, so at this point, I guess we're gonna wrap it up. And Krista, I'll ask if there were any questions loaded in the chat, or if anyone wants to ask any questions at this point.
We have no questions now, but if you have something, please type it in. We'll be happy to answer it for you.
Okay.
It looks like we have no questions, so you must have done a thorough job.
They're making it very easy for me today.
Yep.
All right.
Oh, actually, Mike, one question just came in. When manually separating multiple invoices from one attachment, oh, it says ... So.
Oh, separating invoices like this. I guess.
Oh, here we go. Here's the rest of the question. Do you use the control key to select multiple pages?
You can select the control key to select multiple pages. Yes, you can. Yep. Good question. Yep.
Okay, great. Oh, one more question coming in. Can the email attachment of an invoice be sent from the data entry person and not just an approver?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Yeah. In other words, can you be in data entry and do an email and attach an invoice, just like I demonstrated in the approval screen? Yes. Works the same way. Yep.
Okay, one more question is, what is the price of the Titanium software?
So what I would recommend is that, someone from Accordant can reach out to you, and all we need to do is find out, for example, how many licenses you need. It is based on licensed users, and they would be happy to put together a pricing proposal for you. Again, it's based on the number of licenses.
We will have Cheryl Fogarty reach out to you and discuss pricing. Another question is, if using Titanium on a server, can it be used out in the field on other devices?
Yes, it can. Yep.
All right, so if you do have any other questions, you can simply reach out to us and reply to the recording presentation email later on today. We will reach out to you and follow up on any other inquiries. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe, and thank you for attending. Bye now.
All right, thank you very much.